Good afternoon. Good afternoon, panelists, dear panelists, and all participants to these SMEs. I am Fulvia Raffaelli. I am the head of the unit dealing with circular economy and construction in DG Grow. And it is my pleasure today to moderate this session entitled Squaring the Circle, Encouraging SMEs to Adopt Resource Efficiency and Circular Practices. So the session focuses on practical action and proposals to support the decarbonization of industries and of SMEs in particular, and now to equip and encourage the SMEs to make the circular economy their universal practice. And this afternoon, I'm here with my panelists. First of all, Arthur Den Wold is the Executive Director for Ecopreneur.eu, the European Sustainable Business Federation. Represents about 3,000 businesses in 6 member states, mostly SMEs, which strive to deliver sustainable products and services. I'm also with Annika Edberg, the head of the Sustainable Properties for Prosperity for Europe program at the European Policy Center. And she specializes in climate action, circular economy, smart use of resources, the internal dimension of the EU Energy Union, and industrial transformation. The third panelist is Mr. Diego Mingarelli, who is an entrepreneur and a firm believer in sustainability. He is the president and CEO of Diesen, an innovative company that develops manufacture eco-sustainable products for green buildings. We are also waiting for another 4th panelist, Mr. Mark van der Eyden, but we understand he may have difficulties to join the session, so we may have a surprise, who knows. The session will comprise presentations from the panelists, followed by an interactive question and answer sessions with the participants. And to do so, please enter your question into the chat, clearly indicating to whom you want to address the questions. I could take up already some of those questions to follow up each one of the presentations. Otherwise, we will look at it at the end after the presentation. So please, you can start already introducing your questions. We will also be followed by, from Finland, actually Raquel is graphically recording our session. So at the end, we will have the opportunity to go to her. Before giving the floor to my co-panelists, let me take a few minutes to set the scene for the sessions of this afternoon. Well, on the 11th March 2020, the Commission presented a new circular economy action plan as part of the industrial strategy package. And actually, a few weeks later, Europe, along with other regions of this planet, entered in the biggest lockdown in recorded history. Well, if in March, there was no direct connection between these two facts, it is clear that today, 6 months after, we do see a strong interaction between these two, with the COVID crisis pointing to the fragilities of our economic model and the circular economy pushing all of us to improve the resilience of that same model by increasing the resource efficiency and reduce, all in all, our environmental footprint. So 2 questions are at the very heart of every conversation in Brussels and in member states: how to make our economic model smarter, more resilient, and how to use the recovery as an opportunity to speed up the green and digital translation and eventually get to a more sustainable way of designing, producing, and consuming. Yes, we are convinced that circular economy is a win-win for both the planet and the economy. And a shift to circularity will accelerate economic recovery by improving the efficiency in our production methods, increasing the recovery and the reuse of materials, creating new markets where our industry can be the first movers. And last but not least, increasing our material strategic autonomy through scaled recycling and reuse of materials. At the same time, it is fundamental that this transition will be inclusive and will support companies of all sizes. And in this sense, the SME strategy adopted as part of the industrial package is a key element, and the assembly of today a crucial event to ensure the result. A cornerstone of the new Circular Economy Action Plan is the value retention. How to keep in productive use our materials as assets for as long as possible. This is often called as waste prevention, but I rather prefer to call it business opportunity. For this to happen, we need to change the way market is driven. We need to empower consumers to see beyond immediate price, and we need to give instruments to businesses to provide consumers more value for money by having more transparency and better communication in the value chain. The Sustainable Product Initiative, currently foreseen in the Commission Working Plan for 2021, will propose measures aiming at facilitating a more harmonized rules of market with incentives for more sustainable and innovative products across the whole EU. And we are committed to make this new framework fit for SMEs, and we will need your support. The Commission is in fact about to launch a comprehensive impact assessment study, which will include a series of stakeholders consultation, some of them specifically targeted for SMEs. So stay tuned, as we need your input to design an SME-friendly legislative framework. Now, I could spend quite a lot of time going through the different measures of initiative identified in the Circular Economy Action Plan and getting into the details of the different sectors that have been identified as their greatest circularity potential: construction, textile, electronics, and sustainable chemicals. In particular, the ones that know me already knows that I could spend hours about the incredible circularity potential of the construction sector and the unprecedented opportunity that the objective that we have identified into the renovation wave of at least doubling the rate of building renovation over the next decade will represent for the sector. However, I believe the real added value of today is to listen and to interact with our panelists. So I will assume that you're fully familiar with the Circular Economy Action Plan, that you've read the plan from A to Z. So I'll keep it short and assume that you are fully familiar. Just the last message about the new SME strategy, which will foster circular industrial collaboration among the SMEs, building on training, advice under the Enterprise Europe network on cluster collaboration, and on knowledge transferred via the European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center, the famous EREC. This is a key Commission initiative that is a strong connection with the support to investment in sustainable innovations provided by the European Structure and Investment Funds will help SMEs to grasp new business opportunities related to the resource efficiency and circular economy transition. So let's get into the conversation and try to answer to the question on how SMEs can become the actors of the circular economy of the future and embark in the transformation. I will then invite my first panelist, Mr. Arthur Danholt, Executive Director of Ecopreneur and Circular Economy Experts, to give him first introduction remarks. Please, Arthur, you have the floor.
Thank you, Fulvia, and thanks also for the organizer of this SME Assembly to invite Ecopreneur to give a presentation about how to enabling the full potential of SMEs by creating mass markets for circular solutions. We've never been invited to this assembly, so I'm really thrilled to participate today in this discussion also. So my name is Arthur ten Wolde, and indeed I am the Executive Director of Ecopreneur, which is the European Sustainable Business Federation. And so something more about Ecopreneur. Like already said, we represent about 3,000 companies, and we are seen as the political voice for sustainable businesses in Europe, especially for SMEs. And concretely, we represent about 2,900 small and medium-sized enterprises and about 100 larger companies. And all these companies in 6 member states are what we call Ecopreneurs. So they are entrepreneurial and ecological, they're profitable, and they are sustainable companies. They are all committed to delivering sustainable products and services. And many of them are already generating positive externalities for the climate and the environment. And also important is that they all support the acceleration of the transition to a sustainable economy by systems change. So the goal of Ecopreneur, which was founded 4 years ago, is to create a sustainable economy. And we do this by advocacy and projects. We are a proud member also of the renewed European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. And in our work, our advocacy, we have a focus on the low carbon circular economy and on sustainable finance. For instance, there's just a new project which has just started on the life cycle assessment, which should also be possible for the complete sustainability and also for Ecopreneur. And so Ecopreneurs, and also worth mentioning is that we are still the only cross-sectoral business organization advocating strong sustainability policies at the EU level. So we're a business federation, we're non-for-profit. We also have a partnership with the American Sustainable Business Council. We have several reports, including one report on circular economy in all member states, and a free newsletter. And last but not least, we also have an online free circularity check for SMEs, which you can just assess online via our website. So about our green SMEs experience. So our companies are successful, like I said, with sustainable products and services in their niche, because in most cases it is still a niche. In some cases with the larger companies, like for instance, a company of 1,000 employees, then it's maybe more than a niche, but in many cases, that's what it is. Because what are the advantages for these companies? They deliver more value, it leads to innovation and competitiveness, can lead to asset management, you get more customer loyalty and feedback. You have partnerships, long-term ones. You have risk reduction, very important right now, and a motivated staff, last but not least, that is. So then you could say, if it's so beautiful, then why are we not all doing that? Well, this has to do with the barriers. There are still many barriers for delivering low carbon circular products and services, especially also for SMEs. First of all, the lack of demand pool. Like I said, there are hardly any mass markets for these products and services so there's a lack of demand. That's the major bottleneck. A lack of transparency throughout the value chain, lack of access to funding, the complexity of circular design, regulatory barriers, and there's more. There's lacking price incentives, in many cases, lack of awareness, like was just mentioned by Fulvia, collaborative networks. Also, in many countries, many member states, there are a few examples of successful companies. Then it's difficult to measure it. And finally, also, green businesses are not doing advocacy for circular policies in most member states. So what are the messages that Ecopreneur has on behalf of our 3,000 company network? Well, first of all, We welcome the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan, and also the recovery strategy, the recovery plan, because this contains many things that we've asked for years sometimes, like green public procurements, reuse, repair, a sustainable product policy initiative, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which was announced by Ursula von der Leyen, a digital data space. We're very glad with these plans. Also, we want, for instance, minimum requirements for low carbon circular design for all end products, especially in resource and waste intensive sectors. We also welcome the SME strategy, but we assess that the measures are inadequate to meet the ambitious goals. And I was recently in a meeting in which also Janusz Potočnik spoke, and he had the same conclusion. So we think that more is needed in terms of measures. And first of all, to enable the full potential of SMEs. Because the current measures are not doing that yet. Secondly, also what we would like is to implement economic incentives to create low carbon circular markets. That also has to do with the first one, because without economic incentives, the current linear economy is prolonged. All the incentives right now are still pointing towards the linear economy. That's why we only have niche markets. Then we think that what we ask is much more innovation funding and subsidies, to have much more funding for solutions for the climate and the circular economy. Also, we ask the EU and the member states to attach 100% green strings to all EU funding. Otherwise, again, if it's only 25%, then 75% of the EU funding is still strengthening the linear economy, also in Corona times. And finally, also, we ask to implement progressive EU legislation. And that can be, for instance, an effective ban on landfilling, integration of the social dimension and the circular one, but that's planned. In the financial taxonomy, a tax shift from labor to resources that's connected to the incentives. I think that's the most important. And if we then go specifically to the SMEs, our messages are the following. First of all, we ask for what we call circular acceleration hubs to support SMEs in all EU regions. And indeed, this should be building on existing strengths such as the Enterprise Europe Network, the EREC, and also the Circular Hotspot Network, but also on regional initiatives. And these centers, for instance, taking as a best practice the Dutch Versnellingshuis, which means acceleration house, to do collaboration and advocacy, to do education, information and awareness, like the Dutch CIRCO program for training SMEs on circular design, also for business support and tools, and also collaboration at the European level, but at a regional level. And a second one is an active engagement of SMEs more than now. For instance, by taking SMEs also as an example and taking their best practices as a new standard, as an ambitious new standard for the whole sector. Also to engage them more using the online communication and digital communication now, which makes it easier for them to participate, for instance, in these panels and in groups. The next thing is that we also ask for a second SME impact assessment at the end of all policy processes to prevent that at the end of, for instance, the trilogue, extra administrative burdens are introduced specifically for SMEs, or maybe even specifically for green SMEs, as almost happened in 2019. Then we are very happy, like I said, with the circular procurement plans, and we look forward to the European Commission and Parliament and all the institutions to really start buying circular, but at the same time make sure then that it's really accessible for SMEs. And the last thing I would like to mention is last but not least, we are in favor of a mandatory gate-to-gate life cycle assessment for all companies, including SMEs. Our assessment is that is possible, but except maybe for the very smallest companies, a closer look would be needed. So with that, I would like to conclude. So thank you very much. And here is our website and our email address if you have further questions.
Thank you very much, Arthur. That was full of interesting hints, and you look at the let's say issues or the challenge of getting SMEs from all angles, from an investment angles, from a technology innovation angles, and supply and demand. I think was very interesting to look at, really inscribe the SMEs into a life cycle approach. This is a very, very interesting approach. I would now give the floor to Annick. Now, Annick has been working for a long time in these areas, and she's also a specialist of the digital translation, as we all believe that digital is an enabler, is a fundamental enabler of the transition. I'm sure you will tell them more about it. Please, Annika, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to participate in the discussion today. I would like to start by stressing that the EU as a whole, European policymakers, businesses, big and small, should have a strong inbuilt interest to maintain the value of products and materials for as long as possible, minimize resource use and waste, increase repair, recovery, reuse of materials and products, as well as recycling rates. We know that this provides us the means to decrease our greenhouse gas emissions in line with our 2030 and 2050 climate neutrality goals. And these kind of circular practices can help reduce pressure on Europe's resources, as well as businesses' dependency on foreign resources and their vulnerability in face of volatile prices. And we have seen, at times of COVID, we've seen how important the resilience is and how we do need to find ways to increase our resilience when supply chains may be disrupted. So we know that there's enormous potential that comes with more circular practices. And we know also that there are some areas where the potential is perhaps greater than in others. There's construction, textile, plastics, mobility, electronics. These are all areas where we know that where we could do much more to improve our resource use. And looking at the big picture, it's worth to keep in mind that circular economy and circular solutions are not only needed in Europe, but the demand and the market is growing all the time, also beyond our borders. So there's an enormous business opportunity, and this is growing. The SMEs are a natural partner to circular economy. We've already seen many SMEs developing sustainable circular business models. And often they're even creating these solutions without even recognizing that this is exactly what they're doing. And if we take SMEs' key role in our economy as drivers of innovation, the fact that they are much more flexible in adopting their practices means that they can play a major role in delivering on our ambition on enhancing circular economy, as well as this bigger ambition of achieving a climate neutral and competitive economy. They really can be drivers, enablers of circular economy. But we know that this is often easier said than done. SMEs often have limited capacities, resources, time, as well as knowledge to invest in greater circularity and also to deal with the related administrative barriers, be it regulations or standards. And in this, obviously, already a lot has already been done to help the SMEs improve their operations. The EREC was mentioned. It's indeed platforms like European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center can provide extremely useful information, examples of good practices about how to improve resource efficiency and save related costs. But the SMEs also do need help in capacity building. They need financial support, they need technical assistance, and they need access to good quality and affordable materials. Moreover, and something I would like to focus a bit more in my introductory remarks, is that I think that digitalization could do a lot to help SMEs to improve their own business models, but also address some of the existing barriers there are in them actually building on the possibilities that circular economy provides. We see at the moment a lot of attention being paid to the twin green and digital transitions as part of the EU's recovery efforts from Corona crisis. And I would just like to say a few more words, a bit more on this. The EPC European Policy Centre has worked extensively over the years on looking at how better management of data and digital solutions could contribute to greater circularity by supporting more sustainable business models, by enhancing transparency in value chains, and improving how we design basically the whole circle from design to production, use, reuse, repair, and ultimately managing waste, including recycling. And I find this personally very interesting, as digitalization can give unprecedented opportunities also for SMEs to develop and improve their own business models at fast, but also they can provide them ways to find customers for their sustainable solutions and grow their business. So these are certainly elements that we should try to cherish as we are trying to provide and as we're talking about ways for SMEs to engage more in circular economy practices. We see already at the moment that numerous SMEs are engaged in developing circular business models, like providing services instead of products, including sharing and renting products and services. And this can help reduce their own environmental as well as climate footprint, but this can also help them to make a living by providing more sustainable solutions. We also see businesses already using digital solutions to improve the design of the products and production processes, keeping in mind that up to 80% of products' environmental impact is determined at the design phase. Imagine if we were able to design products, materials, and for example, buildings that are more sustainable, durable, reusable, easily disassembled, upgraded, recycled. This could really accelerate circular economy and help us to design out waste. And I personally find possibilities, for example, 3D modeling and AI especially interesting in improving the design processes and outcomes. We also see that solutions like online platforms, sensors, IoT, AI, and also 3D printing can be used to support reuse, repair, remanufacturing, recycling of materials and products. And if we take the example of industrial symbiosis, which we know is central to circular economy, we see that online platforms are already today being used and arguably could play an even greater role as we go forward in connecting stakeholders so that they can share assets like energy and materials much more efficiently. And just want to say that what we see is that digitalization can do a lot to help many of the complexities that SMEs may face when aiming to adopt more circular practices. But if we really are to build on this potential of aligning the green and digital transitions, looking at SMEs, obviously there are barriers like digital skills. It's worth to note that large companies as SMEs do not always have the same resources to invest in reskilling programs or vocational training and thus adopt new technologies. And if this digital gap is not addressed, this can have significant implications also for SMEs in creating the more sustainable business models that we need. Also, a cost is an issue. For the time being, while new solutions like using AI to improve design processes or 3D printing to optimize production to use just the exact amount of material that we need can be extremely exciting, these do remain very costly. And thus, if we can find ways to use EU funding for digitalization, to target it to develop and deploy digital solutions for enhancing circular economy and sustainable development, this really could help to scale up some of these solutions. And other barriers to digitally enabled business models include the framework conditions. We do have different national legislative frameworks and definitions for waste that can hamper development of new business models, as well as industrial symbiosis. And as long as we have different rules for online platforms across EU member states, this can also hamper the scale up of innovative circular business models across borders. So I just want to conclude just by saying that SMEs have the possibility to be real champions of the circular future, but we really do need to create the framework conditions that allow them to transition towards more sustainable and circular business models. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Annika. That was very, very interesting. You said, and I think it's very true, the SMEs are often very reactive, even fast movers. They can react to the stimulus faster than big companies that may have time of implementation. They may need more time to implement. So SMEs can really jump on the opportunity, let's say, and react very quickly. Yourself, Annika, and Arthur, you refer to the use of to the usefulness of platforms that gets together examples, the good practices as best practices. But actually, let me follow up on that. We have already quite a lot of platforms at the European level. Eric has mentioned the European network, of course, SMEs network is there. We do have already quite a lot in practice. Very, very briefly, what would be something different that you would like to see that we could offer in terms of platforms to the SMEs? Arthur.
Yes, thank you, Fulvia. Yes, indeed, there are already a number of platforms. So in that sense, no lack of networks. But what is lacking, in our opinion, is, and also this came from our survey from Circular Economy in all the member states, that in many member states, something is happening at the national or the regional level. But in most cases, it's not a lot. And in some member states, it's almost nothing. And that means that in those countries, SMEs that want to do something and want to go circular, they cannot find the help in their own member state. And as you know, for SMEs, in most cases, they need help in their own country, in their own language. And this can only be offered at a regional level. So what we propose is to, for instance, use the existing European networks like the EEN and like we just discussed, but then really make sure that the European Commission invests with the member states in the foundation of regional help centers, so to speak, what we call circular acceleration houses, like a one-stop shop for companies and also for municipalities. If they want to switch to a circular model, what should they do? And then they can have all kinds of questions like circular business models, then there is a training. Like funding, then you connect them to funders. Like examples, so you put best practices on the website in that member state or in that region. And then by connecting these regional centers, you create a network that can really accelerate things and include the SMEs and really help them forward.
Okay, so for more bottom-up actually approach, what I can listen to you.
Yes.
And then I go to the construction sector, please, Annika.
Maybe I could just build on that and just say, on the basis of the work that we did, one of the major challenges to achieving circular economy is the transparency in value chains and making sure that the information flows within the value chains. And I think that, for example, recognizing this remains an issue across different sectors. This is an area where certainly more good practices and also that exchange between sectors could be extremely beneficial. For example, we've seen that already in textile sector, a lot of really good initiatives are taking place where SMEs, smaller doers are trying to develop ways of making sure that the information gets transferred across the value chains. And maybe it could be quite beneficial to look at also between different sectors. What can we learn from the textile sector that could be useful, for example, for the construction sector, etc.?
Thank you, Annika. Excellent. Now, Diego, looking to you for the last presentation. You are CEO of a company actually that are made out of green big business. So please, you have the floor. Tell us about your experience.
Thank you. Thanks to the European Commission for the invitation that allows me to share with you my vision. I'm the president and CEO of a chemical company that manufactures eco-friendly products for the construction industry. Eco-friendly choice was not the addition to a fashion, but it was a process, an answer adopted to differentiate our products and enrich them with not replicable technology. Because SMEs actually win when they are able to excel in uncrowded niche. To bring innovation to the construction, we needed a material that would give our plaster and paint lightness and insulating properties. On this journey, we encountered cork and we fell in love with it for its very light structure made up of millions of cells that incorporated air bubbles, which are the best thermal insulator existing in nature. For us, it was a conscious choice, the choice of a market positioning for our business, a choice of sustainability and circular economy, and a specific construction method based on materials that can effectively respond to the climatic needs of the people of Mediterranean, that needs to be protected not only for the cold weather, but most importantly, to protect for the summer heat that can compromise the quality of life, the well-being, and increase the energy consumption for our building. Cork is a bark of a oak that grows only in south of Europe. It absorbs a big amount of carbon dioxide. Cork self-regenerates every 10 years, and this is its sustainability. And the oak trees are not cut down. So cork places our company within a sustainable supply chain. And to us, cork is also part of dynamic of circular economy, because to manufacture our product, we use the waste from the production of cork stoppers, a waste that makes up 80% of the cut and season cork. This waste, it becomes for us a raw material that we refine internally. We produce granules suitable to manufacture our products. And at the end of this process, what we consider waste, we pass into other sector. So this completes our vision of a circular economy. Let me share with you a short video that explains the life circle of cork.
Si ama il sughero ammirando la foresta e le piante, i confini segnati dai muretti a secco, il riflesso bruno e tannico del tronco decorticato. Per capirlo, bisogna inoltrarsi nella sughereta, quando l'opera dei tagliatori è sul punto di cominciare. In Gallura li chiamano bucadori. Sono l'elite della filiera, il corpo speciale del sughero, marinai di foresta con una missione: separare tronco e corteccia a passo di danza e a colpi di scure. Le planche di corteccia vengono raccolte, stagionate, bollite e ridotte in bande da cui si otterranno i tappi destinati a conservare la gran parte dei vini prodotti nel mondo. Una parte del sughero viene macinato negli opifici della Gallura e, dopo un lungo viaggio tra mare e terra, giunge negli stabilimenti Diasen. Ed è qui che comincia la magia che trasforma questo materiale nobilissimo in una componente decisiva dei nostri prodotti per l'edilizia sostenibile e green. Perché il sughero per Diasen non è un destino. Il sughero è una scelta, una filosofia, un'appartenenza. Mettendolo al centro si attualizza la tradizione secolare del costruire mediterraneo e si tutela un ecosistema delicato e peculiare del Mare Nostrum. C'è una traccia sottilissima e forte che muove dai marinai di foresta e, attraverso i nostri prodotti, arriva fin dentro le case per donare agli spazi benessere, comfort e protezione. Per noi è così da 20 anni e lo sarà ancora per molto, moltissimo tempo.
So cork is a choice, a philosophy, and a belonging. This is our idea of a green building future.
Thank you very much, Diego. This is really very interesting. And going back to the regional dimension that was mentioned before, where actually your business is very well enracinated in the region, in the territory. So they're really making the cycle also very short. I mean, from the region to the production and then to the use of the material. So that's it is a very interesting experience. So thank you for that. I recall you that you can introduce actually questions into the chat, and we will be happy to take it for during the presentation. For the time being, we only got a few, but I have questions for you, of course. And my first question is actually also inspired from one we received to the chat, is that to encourage the uptaking of more sustainable product, regulatory approaches, we are working on regulatory approaches. Of course, the Sustainable Product Initiative is foreseen for 2021. And in some areas, we are indeed thinking about specific action, being the construction or the textile. But regulating those matters is quite a complex exercise because we're bringing together quite a lot of elements there. Do you see risks for the SMEs to face a too complex, actually, regulatory environment? How can we reconcile, actually, the complexity of a life cycle approach with the SMEs dimension, where often resources are limited and the time perspective cannot be so long? So, Diego, do you want to tell us what you would expect actually from a regulatory environment that supports your products, also in terms of simplicity, let's say, or affordability from an SME's perspective?
Yeah, I've been working in the building industry for 20 years. And, the framework condition and the legislation can make the difference. Because, it's really important to help the SMEs to create a unique market, a single market, with the same regulation. A lot of times, in my experience of entrepreneur, I've faced a lot of obstacles through the countries of the European Union. So if we want to help the SMEs to, especially in the circular economy, in the sustainability, I believe that it's really important to remove all the barriers, the burdens that can be an obstacle of the single market. A lot of times in Business Europe, we have talked about this problem, especially for the market of the circular. We are talking about something that has to be innovative. And innovative solution needs the same framework of legislation and regulation, because, for the SMEs, a lot of different legislations can be obstacle that is really different to face. So if we want the SMEs are going to grow, it's really important that Europe will be a single and unique market in terms of legislation.
Thank you, Diego. This is very clear. Functioning internal market is an essential, let's say, piece of the puzzle to really bring those products on the market. Actually, the questions I took it from the chat, and Mike Verhagen was addressing the question to you, Arthur, in first place. Is circularity developed enough to be translated into the legislation, or we still need to piloting, let's say?
Circularity developed enough? Yes, we definitely think so. Considering that our 3,000 companies already have products and services on the market, sometimes for 20 years. At the same time, pilots are still needed if you want to do new things. But we are by now, we feel, entering out of the pilot phase of the circular economy, and it's time to scale things up during these 5 years of the European Commission. So if you ask me, and based on the positions of Ecopreneur, what can be done to avoid risks for SMEs? Well, first of all, like I said, the second check at the end of the policy trajectory is therefore very important, because this risk of additional burdens is there. And that's why we want an extra check at the end. And that could avoid it. The second thing is that the existing regulation can be greatly simplified. For instance, if you look at extended producer responsibility, now the name of this is not very nice, but it means that producers have an extended responsibility to take ownership of the product after they have sold it. And that is very important. The existing EPR schemes should be harmonized. That's what we ask. If you do harmonized EPR for all the waste-intensive sectors, then you can greatly simplify it. And another thing is that for the new minimum requirements that are now announced for other products besides the energy-intensive ones that are now covered by the Eco-Design Directive. So if you extend this to all other markets like textiles and buildings, then there are two things. First of all, try to do as much as possible in what is called horizontal measures, like a measure on, for instance, repairability or warranty periods that is the same for all sectors. And second, to try to use existing regulation. For instance, in the construction sector, there is already products regulation. So please use this regulation to make new minimum requirements.
Thank you, Arthur. Annika, any advice on how to reconcile complexity and SMEs' capacity to actually implement?
I think one of the challenges often the SMEs face is that just trying to understand the web of regulation to avoid mistakes in that can be so difficult that some companies may may push off the whole enthusiasm of actually trying to develop the products and getting them on a market. So I think just for SMEs, having easily understandable knowledge, information being made available on what different regulation means for them and where they can go also for help to understand what the implications are for them, I think often would be extremely helpful.
Thank you very much, Annika. I don't see many questions coming up from the chat, so I would continue with my question. I think that what about so we spoke about regulatory framework, we spoke about networks, but you all also stressed the importance of the demand side. So to create a market and to create a demand for low carbon and circular products. At the European level, we can certainly activate some of the leverage, let's say, in this area through the green public procurement and through the definition also of specific target. for procurement in some sectorial legislation. This is what is foreseen into the Circular Economy Action Plan. But what else about activating the private side? So what's the role, in your view, of the private or private procurement, meaning also creating a sort of competition between the big buyers there? No? So can we maybe use also the market-driven, not only rely on, or do we really need this strong regulatory approach to create the demand? Diego, you want to come up from a construction perspective, where of course public procurement play a big role, but also private one.
Yeah, I think first of all we have to work on the awareness of the people. I think that the crisis we are facing can be, unfortunately, opportunity, because people can understand how is important the well-being in their houses. So, in my opinion, this crisis can be an opportunity to understand and to improve the awareness about these themes. At the same time, I'm Italian, and Italy is a leader in Europe with the SMEs in the circular economy and sustainability. We have almost 80% of recycling rate of waste. Maybe this result is the result of historical presence of raw material in our country, because we are countries of transformation. So the Italian result demonstrate that the company that starts to use the circular and the sustainability in their business model can be more resilient for the future, because they invest more in R&D, they invest, they export more instead of the traditional. They use the digital technology for the innovation. So, in my opinion, Europe has to push on all the key performance indicator to improve, to add awareness in the new this new challenge we are going to face. At the same time, it's really important to invest in skills, because we need soft skills in our company. In our companies, we need, especially in the SMEs, we need all the soft skills like problem solving, leadership, because we are talking about a change of the process. So, if SMEs has to manage a change, it's really, really important to find people that is ready to handle this change. And also in this kind of sector, European Union can work and can help the company to improve the skills.
Thank you, Diego. Looking, Annika, to you, would also, in this context, more reporting obligation for companies help, let's say, creating that demand? Annika, I'm asking.
Sure, I can jump in. Thank you very much. I think that's, I'd just like, when we're talking about creating demand, I think that there certainly is a role for regulation in here and creating those enabling conditions and kind of pushing for that demand with the tools that we have. You mentioned public procurement. I think that it's essential in this, and there's so much more that we could be doing across the EU in really using one of the best tools that we have in encouraging more circular business models and solutions. But there are also role for the ongoing challenges we have. with the definition of waste. We have challenges with creating demand for secondary raw materials. It often still tends to be the case that secondary raw materials may be more expensive than virgin materials may be. So we really do need to find a way how we can use the tools that we have to address this, be it with looking through VAT, be it through looking at how can we actually take better into account the environmental, societal costs of sourcing virgin materials, etc. So there certainly is more we can do in that space. But then when it comes to industry, basically creating competition and also amidst itself, I think that something it's worth to stress here is that the race has started. We all know the direction where we need to be going. We have the Sustainable Development Goals. We have the Paris Climate Agreement. We have at the EU level, we have the Green Deal. We have the 2030 climate targets. We have the 2050 climate neutrality goals. We know that circular economy will be a main avenue for us when we are trying to address these global and European challenges. And it's in our interest, and it's in the interest of European businesses, big and small, to be part of this race. As I mentioned earlier, the market is growing also beyond our borders. And if our European players, if the SMEs in Europe can be those who are creating the solutions that will be needed in the market, not only today, but tomorrow, that can help them to become standard setters. They can become the future market leaders in this area. So it should be an inbuilt interest within the industry to really capture this potential there is with this growing market and create the competition within themselves and basically push each other to do better.
Thank you, Annika. Arthur.
Yes, thank you, Fulvia. Well, first, coming back to your question about procurement. Yes, we think it's very important to also include private procurement, because if you look at public procurement, that's only 14% of the buying power at the EU market, 1/4. So 86% is probably private. And there are good examples, for instance, again, in the Netherlands, but also in Belgium and also in Paris and in Baltic states. There have been successful, what is called green deals, but these are at a national or a regional level, green deals on circular procurement, where both public municipalities, but also companies, large companies, have done pilots. So there's the piloting, indeed. Pilots on circular procurement. Just do it, because there's nothing holding companies back except of fear of litigation, but you can circumvent all these problems if you just start doing it. And that creates a market. Now, the second thing I want to say is that to create competition, we need a market. And therefore, our companies are asking for true price. So true pricing is really a very crucial thing that was not mentioned yet. So I was talking about economic incentives, but these are all mentioned to create a true price so that you include the social and the environmental costs of a linear product in the price. And so it should be fair, but a really fair market. And also that's why we are so happy with the initiative to create a carbon border adjustment mechanism to really avoid the unfair competition now from outside.
Thank you, Arthur. This is it's very interesting. In this, the price signaling is one of the elements that would need to get it right. Although it is a complex matrix that we would need to put together to identify the product, and also be aware that this may lead to an over increase of the prices, and that's with the consequences for consumer or not. I see you don't agree. Arthur, please.
For some, yes. So linear products will become more expensive. That's true. But at the same time, the circular solutions, the low carbon products and services will become cheaper. That is how the true price works. And also, in the meantime, when we still don't have true pricing, you can use two mechanisms to lower the price for the SMEs with circular solutions. One of them is the VAT. there's a problem with that because the current VAT directive forbids that for most products and services, but still it can be done. And the second one is, like I said, the extended producer responsibility, because you can use those schemes, and there are already dozens of schemes operative to create what we call what is called an eco-modulation of the fee. That sounds difficult, but it makes simply, if you have a circular solution, you don't have to pay the fee for the waste management, or you have a very low fee. So then you get a cheaper product.
Thank you, Arthur. Diego, you mentioned the importance of consumer awareness, indeed, in creating the market. What's the role for SMEs? Is it about informing, or SMEs are more connected with consumers on one side, on most of the condition. How is this relation between SMEs and consumer awareness?
Of course, it's not easy to answer because there are a lot of difference for the different, business cases and the sector. In my experience in the building, we work with the influencer, the architects, the engineer, that they are open-minded, in the choose the new technology. And a lot of times we used to work with these people because they want to study to promote the new. And in that case, we are going to create the demand because maybe it's not the end user that is going to try to find out new technology, but sometimes there are a lot of influencers that are going to find new solutions, especially in the green building industry. And about the green building industry, of course, there are a lot of different regulations, and some of them, these architects, they are able, to handle all the regulation there are. But based on my experience, it's really important that we have standards that has to be unique. For instance, we have done some certification like the Environment Product Declaration. That is international standards. That is good for Europe, but also beyond Europe. With that standards, we have the same language of architect that is Europe, but also in Asia. And through that standards, that certificate, we have found the opportunity to sell our materials around the world. And the final user, they understand, because sometimes when they are going to buy their house, they have a label that is the same label of, and we have the same languages. And so we are going to create the market through the influencer, but a market that arrives till the end user.
Thank you, Diego. This is very important. Our EN 15804 is really a reference around the world in terms of environmental declaration. So it is a very, very important experience that we also try to incorporate in our reflection about the revision of the construction product regulation and how to make it indeed clear tools to communicate about the performances of construction products. I see the time is running very quickly, so before going into last round of comments from your side, where I would suggest you could maybe focus on one measure that you would like to prioritize in supporting the SMEs to really grasp the potential of the circular and sustainable transition. I would go to Raquel in Finland for looking at a visual and graphic record of our chat. Okay, let's see. Okay, that's very small on my screen, so it's difficult for me to comment. So, okay. Yeah, so encouraging SMEs, that's very nice. You see a scale, and you see these are the SMEs running, I would say, towards the objective. So it looks indeed very, very dynamic, I'd say, because that's probably the word that came out of your presentations altogether. Dynamic. And let's. You said the race has started already. Most of these SMEs are embarking into the change, and we need to create the condition for them to be able to grasp the opportunity. And I think this is also very visible from the graphic. And I see in the chat that this graphic record will be available as a part of the conference result. So a last 1 minute last statement from each one of you. Annika, you start, please.
Thank you very much. I'll pick on something as going forward, something that we didn't have sufficient time to focus on. It's EU funding, MFF, Recovery Fund. There is so much potential. It's obviously it's not going to change the world, and the amount, the money is not that much. However, it sets a signal what actually matters for the EU. And if we use the MFF, if we use the Recovery Fund to support innovation, support digitalization, support the green transition, and in that help the SMEs in this effort, it really can send a very strong signal that this is what EU stands for. And I would like to come back to what I said in my introduction, is that SMEs are drivers of innovation, as they are such flexible bodies in this transition. It's extremely important that they trust in themselves. They can be real doers in this transition. And on the basis of the work that we did on looking at digitalization and circular economy, we saw that Europe is already a hub for solutions that are capturing the benefits of digitalization for circular economy. So as we move forward, let's build on that. Let's build on the skills, the capacities, the knowledge that we have in Europe. There's such a vast, enormous base to build on, and we can really make the SMEs a real doers in this transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annika. Diego, your final word.
2 points. First of all, in the SMEs, innovation is incremental. A lot of time, European Union is going to incentive the disruptive in innovation. Circular is not disruptive, especially in the SMEs, is incremental, and so we have to find a way to help the SMEs also in innovation that is not disruptive. Second, sustainability is not a cost. Is a way to be more competitive, because it can be a reduction of cost. At the same time, it can be a great opportunity to differentiate our solution and to find the demand of people that want a new world, that want a change. So for the SMEs, the sustainability and the circular economy can be a great opportunity for this century.
Thank you very much, Diego. Great encouragement to our SMEs. Arthur, your partner suggests.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to point out again the importance of circular acceleration houses in all regions to give trainings to SMEs on how to do circular design, because this can be learned, but these skills are very important. And this is also important at the local and regional level to make EU funding relevant for SMEs, because for most SMEs, the current Horizon 2020 programs and COSME, it's not relevant. And the second thing, I want to say that we are indeed also in favor of the environmental product declarations that were mentioned by Mr. Mingarelli, and also of product environmental footprints. But the footprint calculations are in general too expensive for SMEs. So that's why we point out how important it is to have gate-to-gate analysis and LCA. And finally, I want to mention the tax shift. I forgot to mention this, but the tax shift from labor to resources is very important, because then you can lower the costs on labor and higher the costs on the resources, and you don't have to make the products more expensive. And then you create a market and a race to the top, also for SMEs.
Thank you very much. Excellent. I think indeed we haven't touched upon many elements because it's so rich. I mean, there are so many ways why SMEs can jump and really grasp the opportunities, and it will be up to us regulators to create the conditions, but also to you, entrepreneurs and SMEs, to jump on the train. A big thank to all of you. I think it was very interesting from my side. A big round of applause to all the panelists and participants. A virtual applause from my side. All the best also to the organizers. That was really, really a big achievement. Thank you very much to all of you. And I'm sure we will see each other potentially not virtually anymore, but in presence here in Brussels or in one of your member states. But let's go for it. This is a really, really big and exciting journey that we are embarking on at the European, national, regional, and territorial way. So thank you very much to you, and see you soon. Bye.